listening to Let's Talk Sustainable Business.
Hi, my name is Barbara Mendes-Jorge, and I am a sustainability communications expert based in Brussels, Belgium. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this edition of Let's Talk Sustainable Business, a series brought to you by the Conference Board. Today is the first of a two-part episode with Louise Ayling. Louise is Director of Sustainability and a board member at Radley Yeldar, a creative consultancy specialising in corporate communications for organisations who are driving decisive, sustainable change. RY have a particular emphasis on sustainability, working with global organisations to develop their sustainability strategies, shape their sustainability reporting, and develop engagement and behaviour change campaigns. Ultimately, RY's work aims to combine inspiration and evidence to help build belief in their clients. Based in London, Louise leads RY's sustainability offer and helps companies and nonprofits define their sustainability strategy and tell their story with purpose, in intrigue, and above all, credibility. Louise says, I work in the sweet spot between technical sustainability and effective communications, with an unwavering focus on the need for genuine impact. I have a particular interest in human rights and work with global clients across a variety of sectors, including Microsoft, Puma, Danone, and the WBCSD. For this episode, we return to the theme, how greenwashing can impact your company's reputation and finances. As we know, greenwashing regulation continues ramping up worldwide, with huge consequences for businesses in Europe and globally. RY are very aware of the issues companies face when communicating about sustainability. They say, climate strikes and the unfortunate proliferation of natural disasters has seen mainstream opinion shift to accept that man-made climate change is real and serious. As a result, more time, money, and effort is pouring into sustainability than ever before. Brands and organizations are speaking about it, but are they doing so in a way that is making people listen and act? What we're seeing is a shift in quantity, not quality, of communications. And in their 2021 report, Words That Work, Effective Language in Sustainability Communications, RY reviewed the sustainability web pages from 50 of Forbes' 100 most valuable brands and compared the communication style with 10 brands widely considered to be leading in terms of their sustainability communications. This built on their previous 2018 version of Words That Work, which focused on the visual aspects of sustainability. In this report, RY conclude that while there may have been improvements, progress on sustainability issues is still being held back by communications that lack either the strategic rigor or creativity used to communicate in other spheres. And RY want to alert people to the unconvincing stock sustainability language seen across so much sustainability communications writing, which, consciously or unconsciously, is sterile, inauthentic, and could lead to accusations of greenwashing. So what can companies do to avoid this? Well, I welcome you, Louise. I'm really looking forward to chatting about greenwashing and sustainability communications with you today.
Thanks, Barbara. It's great to be here.
Lovely to have you. Can I first ask about the evolution of your career? So how did you end up focusing on sustainability communications?
Yeah, of course. Great question. I graduated in a recession, so the pressure to get a job, kind of regardless of what it was a priority. But enjoying my work has always been really important to me. So I did geography at university, really enjoyed sustainability and communications, but I didn't know that sustainability consulting was a thing back then. I almost went into journalism, and then I actually started out interning at Fabergé in marketing and PR, which was brilliant and bonkers. It paid £2.50 an hour, so not much in central London. So when the money ran out, I joined a media company producing kind of special interest reports in the press. So you might have seen in the newspaper those kind of supplements that look the same as the newspaper, but actually they're kind of brand sponsored content. So my role was basically in sales, selling advertising and kind of sponsored editorial content within those reports. I hated it. It was cutthroat, super high pressure, but I kind of focused on the sustainability focused publications. And then kind of driven by the desire to actually find out what I wanted to do, ended up discovering that sustainability communications consultancy was a thing. Joined a little agency as an intern, and then when that ended, moved to North Veritas, DNV, which is a big global firm. I was in the sustainability consulting department and kind of focused really on the kind of more comms driven side. A lot of my colleagues worked a lot on the kind of report assurance side, but I found my niche in sustainability reporting and strategy work, but decided I wanted a more creative outlet. So joined Radley Yeldar, which has an in-house creative team. so that I could kind of bridge the technical aspects of sustainability with the communications that are so necessary to drive change. And I instantly loved it, and I've been here ever since for 8 years.
That's really interesting. I think we must be similar ages, because I also graduated into a recession, and that really impacts the choices you make and the choices you can make in that situation. So I'm really glad that, it started off a little bit more difficult, but that you managed to find your niche and find something that you enjoy. We mentioned it up the top, but what sorts of clients do you work with at RY? Do you work with specific sectors, specific organizations? You mentioned companies and nonprofits. What kind of client are you looking for?
It's a real mix. We predominantly work with business. So we work with larger multinational organizations like Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson, Syngenta, Puma, as well as smaller businesses or those operating in kind of more of a single region. And I'd say our clients really range from leaders in sustainability right through to those who are just getting started, and we work across all sectors. And then we also work with nonprofits and NGOs. So, for instance, we work with WRAP, a kind of big recycling charity that you may have heard of, on behaviour change campaigns to encourage more recycling. We've recently worked with the Gemological Institute of America, GIA, to develop their sustainability strategy. They're a nonprofit, as well as brand work for the ILO, and of course our long-standing partnership with WBCSD. So predominantly business, but we do work with NGOs and nonprofits too.
Nice. And I guess working with so many different sectors, you can learn from different areas and then take those learnings into the work that you do in the future.
Totally. It's an amazing career to basically kind of dip our toes in all sorts of industries, be really nosy, and take learnings from one industry to another as well.
Nice. Well, related to that, what's the best piece of sustainability communications or your favorite campaign that you've worked on?
So that's a really difficult call, I think. So many great
I can give
projects
you
and
an option for
clients.
several if you like.
And
Three.
I'd say probably my favourite has been working on Lidl UK's first ever sustainability report. It was quite a few years ago now, but it felt particularly pivotal. They really wanted to be very communicative in their style. We linked their reporting to their existing Lidl Surprises campaign, which was out at the time, which really lifted the lid on more surprising ways that Lidl was embedding sustainability across the organisation. And I suppose, to be honest, it was just a really refreshing take on reporting. It was very interactive as an online experience. The language used and the visual style was really key, kind of deviating from the usual approaches, and it turned the concept of a traditional report on its head. And this work, I think, was done actually before the launch of the visual language for sustainability and words that work that, of course, we're talking about today. So it was, a bit of a precursor to that.
Lovely. And you've segued right into my next question, because I gave a long presentation on words that work, which I adore. I really wanted to talk to you about this because I think it's an amazingly clear and practical guide, which I reference when I do my own anti-greenwashing trainings. And I highly recommend anyone listening to this episode to go and check it out. So how did the idea for it originate?
Thank you for kind of your praise for the work. It was a brilliant piece of work. The team did an epic job who were involved. The idea came from our collective frustration, I suppose, about the state of sustainability communications and the design and the language that was used. For some reason, when it comes to communicating about sustainability, the core principles of good communication seem to go out of the window. Most brands kind of morph into this stale corporate version of themselves. And it's probably because sustainability professionals tend not to be communicators or marketeers. And then similarly, communicators and marketeers often don't have the rigorous understanding of sustainability. And so Words That Work is actually a follow-on piece from some research we did a couple of years earlier, which focused on sustainability design. We were really tired of seeing sustainability depicted by sad polar bears on stranded ice caps and the cliched imagery of plants growing out of light bulbs and water droplets in cupped hands. It felt quite lazy, and it didn't reflect the information people were looking at to convey. And we've all seen kind of images of wind turbines alongside content that's completely unrelated. And so it's almost as though people were kind of doing a Google search of images of sustainability and then just selecting from the first page of those results. So we did some research of the FTSE 100 to ascertain the extent of the problem, and then we developed 10 principles for effective sustainability design. And it really struck a chord. So a couple of years later, we turned our attention to messaging, which was the kind of next big problem area. Sustainability messaging's been filled with cliches and jargon and meaningless statements, when in fact what's needed is the exact opposite. We need to communicate like our lives depend on it, to motivate, to inspire, to engage people, to change behavior, to ignite change, and really hold ourselves and businesses to account. And I've lost count, I think, of the number of sustainability reports I read that say sustainability is in our DNA, or people are at the heart of our business, or sustainability is at the heart of everything we do. And the vast majority of the time, it's not true. And they're what we call stock sustainability phrases that people reach for because it's become the norm. So that really was the motivation for doing this research in shaping a more effective way for companies to communicate about sustainability.
So obviously this is an audio medium and you can't see how hard I was nodding at everything that Louise was saying, because as someone who works in sustainability, everything she says rings true. I think, as Louise mentioned, there is a tension sometimes when you have the sustainability and the marketing and communications people. And when I've given anti-greenwashing trainings, it's been a bit of a mixed bag on why I'm doing it. But for one organization that I'm working with, I did it for the marketing and communications team because the sustainability team were getting a bit frustrated with, the way that the language was being transformed into something that it wasn't. So, I came along to point them in the right direction. And I think the thing from Words That Work that strikes the chord the most, and when I talk about it to people, I almost see the light bulb go off in their head, is stock sustainability. Because I think what is really great about RY is you've given a name to something that is so prevalent, but that we don't even realize that that's what it is. Like you say, it is the images of solar power when it has nothing to do with solar power. I am allergic to the color green in a lot of branding. Nature, when it, like I've seen, nature images in a tech company, with some grass on a farm, and you're just like, so yeah, I really recommend looking it up, because it's if you're trying to get someone to avoid greenwashing, I think it's the best way to kind of guide them in the right direction. So have you seen the same level of resonance with your clients? For example, is this something that before working with a client you would present to them to make sure that they're on the same page as you?
Yeah, some of our clients come to us because they've seen it already. It resonated
Perfect.
with them, and then they want support to kind of change the way that they're communicating about sustainability. For others, yeah, we share it at the beginning, and it, as you say, that light bulb always tends to go off in their minds. And often I think people just need to see what the problem is that they haven't necessarily been able to put their finger on previously, and then we kind of work with them on the principles to make sure that they're being followed in the communications that we develop going forward.
I think that's it. Sometimes it is kind of time constraints, right? You think I've got to write something about the environment, so right, wind turbine equals environment, but then when you, like you say, when you see that over and over again, it kind of becomes meaningless. So your first piece of research focused on the visuals, the second on the messaging. Is there a new Words That Work or something similar in the pipeline? Are you still focusing on the same topics?
So we're thinking of doing an update and bringing in some fresh examples. I think the problem's still pretty rife, and so Words That Work itself is still really relevant and kind of rings through today, even though it's a couple of years old now. We have just launched some new thinking on the conflation of sustainability with ESG, which is a problem of language as well as sentiment, really. And that's gone down really well so far. So again, it's kind of still looking at the problem around language and the way that sustainability is conveyed. But yeah, watch this space for a part 2 of Words That Work. Potentially, there's lots of new communications coming out that would be good case studies for it.
You heard it here first. It's an exclusive. More may be coming. So I think you answered my next question, but maybe you can delve into it a bit more. my next question was going to be, since publishing this, do you feel like stock sustainability is still at a similar level, or is it improving? Do you think that companies are getting wiser to it, or are the same issues still there? And if so, what do you think needs to be done most urgently to tackle it?
I think some brands are getting much better at communicating about sustainability, but it is, as I say, still quite rife, this kind of stock sustainability concept, especially in the reporting space and on companies' websites. I think in the campaign space and kind of wider communications, it tends to be improving. They tend to be a bit more communicative and progressive. Although I would say in that campaign space, you do tend to see more of those sweeping claims because there's less space for substantiating information. So yeah, in general, the problem is still very prevalent, and our work research, as I said, is kind of as relevant today as it was when it was published. We'd love for organisations to really scrutinise their sustainability comms and really ask themselves whether they're falling into these traps, to try and, just kind of pave a more effective way that's a bit truer to themselves for communications going forward.
When I talk to companies about this, I think sometimes the excuse given is one of fear, and I've talked about this on another episode as well. Of if we're so bold, if we're so transparent, are we putting our neck out there? If our peers aren't doing the same, is another issue. If everyone in a certain industry is being very conservative and very bland, I think sometimes companies are scared to kind of step out on a ledge and put themselves out there. So would you have any advice for companies who say things like this to embolden them to be a bit more bold in their communications?
It's really difficult. And I think often we find that even progressive sustainability teams, when we're working with them on campaigns and reports and communications, may want to be really bold and transparent, but when it gets to the legal team sign off, quite near the end of the process, often that transparency can become a little unraveled. So getting the legal teams buy-in really early on in the process is important to prevent that kind of last minute blocker. But it's also, I think it's, as you say, it's become habitual to kind of use sustainability communications almost to kind of showcase the good things that organizations are doing, rather than being really open and transparent around performance and challenges and weaknesses. And so I think it comes down to the motivations for why an organization is communicating about sustainability. What's the purpose of it? Is it to sell more products, in which case maybe they need to take a step back and kind of reevaluate those motivations? Or is it to kind of really showcase the kind of current state of play around sustainability in the organization, the direction of travel, how they're performing really transparently, and kind of being open and honest about that, in order to also help others in the industry and for consumers to make more informed choices and things like that. So transparency is really key. It builds credibility, it builds trust. But I think, as you say, there's a real fear of opening themselves up and being vulnerable to the criticism that inevitably comes with transparency.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I always try and advise companies that to communicate more about their challenges, but you can also qualify them. You can say, look, whatever it is, we wanted to move to 100% renewable electricity. We haven't been able to, but this is why, and these are the steps that we're taking to move forward. Rather than being like, we care, like you say, we care about the environment. The environment is essential. It's much better to do that. And your conversation actually led me to quickly draw up a report I saw recently. So the PwC Consumer Intelligence Series Survey on Trust found, and I think this is fascinating, that there's a huge gap between the trust that consumers have in companies and the trust business leaders think consumers have in all their organizations. So in this survey, 30% of consumers trusted certain companies, and of the business leaders of those companies, 87% said that they thought consumers trusted their company. So I think that there's a huge mismatch as well in what business leaders think consumers want to hear and what is transparency to them. And yeah, maybe as communicators, we need to help companies do the work to untangle this and reassure them that no, they can be more transparent and open.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I think that data just shows the imperative for that transparency and that kind of huge gulf that exists between those internal perceptions of how audiences are kind of perceiving company performance and that trust piece.
Exactly. And I mean, you mentioned reporting, and I think we're going to get into that in part 2 a little bit more. So thank you to Louise for joining us today. This is the first of a 2-part episode, so join us next time for part 2. And thanks to our listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe to this podcast series and explore the entire catalogue of podcast programming from the Conference Board by visiting our website at tcb.org/podcasts. See you next time.
That was Let's Talk Sustainable Business.